There's something about trading card games that I really love. Collecting them, building my own decks, battling against friends and people online, and losing in a spectacular fashion. It just brings me back to simpler times. It's too bad there's no Megami Tensei trading card game. There is, but those cost money, and I don't have any money. Too bad there isn't a Megami Tensei trading card video game. You know what? I'm not even surprised at this point. It can't be good though. Can it? Well, Shin Megami Tensei Card Summoner was released on the Gameboy Color in 2001, and remains a Japan exclusive to this day. The game is just one of Atlus's many attempts to capitalize on the success of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh at the time. While other games have managed to ride on the coattails of these two trading card game giants, Shin Megami Tensei Card Summoner fails to convey any of their charm. Plagued with a directionless plot with forgettable characters and long-winded tutorials, it's no wonder that this game vanished into obscurity so quickly. If anything, this feels like a poor man's version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Academy before any of those games were even released. There is some potential with card summoners every now and then, specifically with the card game and mechanics itself, but it's not enough to save the game entirely. Had it been released on a system with better graphics like the Game Boy Advance or even the PSP, I actually do think it would have seen a bit of success. But honestly, it comes as no surprise that this game was never localized to a Western audience. Now, the game is relatively short, and it took me about 15 hours to complete, but keep in mind that if you don't know Japanese, you're gonna have a bad time. I wouldn't say the Japanese is that difficult. Someone around the N3 level could probably manage their way for the most part. Honestly, if you're looking to learn the language, then this is actually a pretty good game to play in my opinion. Although there are way better options. Being that this is a trading card game, I wouldn't say there's that much going on, which should make it easy to keep track of. Yet, the way things are laid out structure-wise don't really help its case here, as you start off in an academy-like school dedicated to teaching kids about the Card Summoner game. Why you're at this school is never really brought to attention. There's no real common shared goal or objective by the students either. They're just there. It's just full of one-dimensional, gimmicky characters who like Megami Tensei card games, I guess. Although you're new to the game, it's discovered that you have a natural talent for it, and because of this, everyone wants a piece of you, despite not knowing how to play the game until 5 minutes ago. This makes it rather difficult to determine who your rival is supposed to be, or if there is actually one to begin with, as you constantly go from one battle to another, switching opponents each time. Factoring in that many of these characters are practically the exact same just with a different sprite, the game's objectives and who you should be comparing yourself to gets a bit fuzzy. You'll see a good portion of your time spent doing random objectives given to you and the other students. One-on-one challenges, tournaments, collecting Mitama cards, and several lessons. Oh, so many lessons at the beginning. While this does make the environment pretty casual, the pacing is rather chaotic as these events don't really have a clear conclusion, instead just having a different task interject itself midway. As things progress, the Academy and the tools it offers begin to open up a bit more as well. You'll be able to explore more of the Academy, freely battle against others or an AI system, as well as purchase new cards at the card shop. The card shop, while not the most engaging, was something I found rather enjoyable. Both singles and packs can be purchased here, with the shop updating pretty often as well. There are also other packs dedicated to certain alignments, adding some variety. I think those who enjoy the collection aspect of card games will find some value here, as there are a lot of cards to collect. That said, there still isn't that much to do outside of these things just mentioned. The main dilemma, if you want to consider it that, also doesn't open up until several hours into the game, which by that point, you're almost near the end. It also doesn't make that much sense either. The Academy is just randomly overtaken by demons, and it's up to you and one other character to defeat them and save the other students. Wait, so you're telling me they're playing a card game depicted on demons that actually exist in their world? Wouldn't you rather, I don't know, want to actually fight the demons instead? Not only that, but there's a company profiting from these trading cards based on these demons? You know what? I don't even care at this point. At least our rival is finally established, so there's that. You'll end up dueling against a handful of popular demons, usually in groups of 3, before reaching the main boss himself, King Frost. Most of these duels against these demons are rather easy, really downplaying the threat. The final few do put up a good fight though, and once this stage of the game is complete, that's it. The game's over. That's not only the basis of the story, but practically the entire game. There are some post-game challenges, duels, and a few extra cards to get, but let's face it, do you really want to do any of these? I mean, let's just call this game for what it is, and that's a vaguely put together mess of random objectives that lead to no true conclusion. There doesn't even feel like there's an attempt to cover a typical story for a trading card video game in any regard. It's not like there aren't things that go along with the card game theme or academy-like environment, but there's no real objective established from the very beginning to make the player actually feel like they accomplished anything by the end. While I appreciate some level of originality with its plot, it's honestly not needed. If I didn't make this clear enough, I wish that Card Summoners emphasized more on a storyline about becoming the strongest duelist. It's simple yet engaging, and that's all you really need for these types of games. Side quests and small character stories can also be added, but they shouldn't be the main focus. What we do get is a bunch of nonsense just thrown together for the sake of making a clone of a popular series at the time. and this nonsense is equally as bad when it comes to the characters, who don't contribute that much. Outside of the two characters that teach you how the card game works, no one has a clear role. Everyone feels pretty insignificant for the most part, not bringing anything to the story or elevating the academy-like feeling of the game. Coaches, for example, which are the teachers at the academy, are probably the easiest duels in the entire game, and only one of them actually teaches you anything. The rest just hang around standing there. I didn't even know half of them were coaches until I finished the game. As for students, they don't feel like students either. Most of them probably make one somewhat minor appearance, if that. None of them follow any common tropes or possess any real identity. I also feel that the lack of decks or specific cards that characters gravitate towards really hinders this as well. In total, there's around 10 students, but only 2 or 3 feel slightly established. And I mean slightly. Furthermore, the antagonistic students share the same overly emotional, aggressive personality, with the only difference being their character sprites. And because this issue spreads to other groups as well, I had a hard time distinguishing who was who at certain points. Everyone just blends into the background, making the academy feel like a school of the same 3 people. Also, why does this girl's character hide in the men's bathroom and challenge people to card game quizzes? As for the demons that take over the academy, I really don't understand their purpose. They're also not that difficult for the most part. It really isn't until the very end where they start using more powerful cards or come in with an actual strategy. But my main issue with the group is everyone lacks a role. I'm fine with having NPCs, but if you're going to have your game take place in an academy, then you need to have stronger character interactions and clear roles from the start. I can maybe understand the limitations for this if it were an early Game Boy game, but this is a Game Boy Color game released well into its life cycle. There's really no excuse for not putting in a bit more effort with everyone's involvement. I guess you can say there's always some delight seeing Jack Frost and Pyro Jack, but as for the rest of the characters, it's rough. Surprisingly though, the card game is much better than I expected, and I actually found myself having some fun with it. It's nothing groundbreaking and doesn't entirely compensate for the flaws with the story and characters, but it brings some energy to the game. To begin, I believe this is a simplified version of the already existing card game from that time. Don't quote me on that though. I couldn't find enough information online to confirm this. This kind of decision does make a lot of sense for a trading card video game though, as it makes things much easier to learn for new players, and for the most part, it's a fairly straightforward card system in my opinion. I do think it still needed more time to cook in the oven, but there is some potential here. The objective is pretty standard for any card game. Either reduce your opponent's hit points to 0 or have them deck out, which I have yet to actually do. Decks are made up of 40 cards with demons following a certain alignment combination and a few items. At the beginning of each duel, you'll draw up to 7 cards with the option to redraw once if you don't like your hand. Each player will have up to 20 hit points as well as 4 magnitude points, or MP, used for summoning your cards. Like many other older Megami Tensei games, magnitude plays an important factor here, so learning how to utilize your deck around this obstacle will make things much easier. Fortunately, MP resets each turn and can increase depending on the cards you summon. For the most part, I feel that it's actually pretty well incorporated here. In addition to attack and hit points, each card will be paired with 2 alignments. Your card's alignment can impact its summoning costs, decreasing if it matches your deck's alignment or increasing if it doesn't. This is a fun gimmick, but it's not overly emphasized until later in the game once battles begin to pick up a bit. Additionally, some demons can use skills that consume MP as well. Up to 3 summoned demons can attack each turn, with the opposing party either choosing to defend these attacks, going head on with their cards, or just take the damage directly. No matter the difference in a card's attack and hit points, neither party will take damage unless it's a direct attack. And just like magnitude points, hit points also reset each turn if the card isn't destroyed, which does incline players to constantly defend if they can withstand the attack. Keep in mind that demons that were just summoned aren't allowed to attack, giving both sides some breathing room to create a strategy if needed. Attacking cards will also be frozen until your next turn, which can be a huge drawback at times, sacrificing your line of defense for a short period. This is where I ran across one of my main issues with the dueling system, as I get the notion that the enemy is too defensive minded, often going several turns without declaring any strong offensive commands. Even after fusing for stronger demons or securing a pretty comfortable lineup, they kind of just wait for you to put yourself in a risky situation. As a result, this makes most duels feel like a slow burn, especially in the early stages of the game. Things also get a bit shaky once card types are introduced. These are different from card alignments, instead referring to whether the demon is a land or flying type. In general, they're easy to understand, but there's a clear disparity between the two that makes things unfair pretty quick. In the case of land monsters, they're only able to defend against other land monsters. However, they can't defend against any flying type enemy. On the other end, flying type demons are able to defend against either group. There are some exceptions depending on a card's restrictions, but you can always swap these out for a different card. In contrast to this creates a significant imbalance in battles if one person manages to draw all flying type cards immediately. Land type cards also feel the most abundant, so you'll find your early decks filled with these. Break cards, which have a special skill to block attacks from regular cards, restore some balance. However, just like flying type demons, they can also make things one-sided really quickly. Really, your only saving grace to these situations are using a card's skills, item cards, and the heart of the cards, which also does bring some variety to the game. Though these cards don't always make up a significant part of your deck. There's also far less of them until later on once your deck is pretty set in stone, and using them will eat up your available MP. And just like attacking, using a skill will leave your card frozen, so the drawbacks might be high if you're not in a comfortable position when using them. Personally, these didn't take away from my experience here though. Mostly, I found most of my issues with the cards and enemies being a little too defensive minded, which results in a lot of lag from both ends. I wish that they expanded a bit more with the alignments or incorporated elements as well. I think this would have made things feel a bit more dynamic. As for the most part, everything's pretty straightforward. With that said, Card Summoners also takes hand-holding to a whole new level when it comes to demonstrating how its rather simple card system works. Not only will you have to sit through a pretty long-winded tutorial, but because this is a school-like environment, you'll have to go back to the classroom after the first handful of duels to learn more. On top of that, the game introduces you to the normal rules pretty gradually, starting off with beginner rules and then progressing to slightly modified versions of these rules. I'm not sure what they were attempting to accomplish by limiting so many rules and features until the halfway point of the game, especially when there aren't that many to begin with, but I guess that helped add to the academy feel of the game. Once duels get going though, these annoying issues vanish for the most part, and while not everything seems fully thought out, there are a lot of good ideas that make it a pretty fun card game. As for the rest of the game's presentation, it's nothing mind-blowing. It's pretty standard for a Game Boy Color game and does exactly what you would expect. That said, it still runs pretty slow at times, but emulation helps with this a lot. A bulk of the lag stems from the issues we just discussed, as well as some stretched out animations and duels. Speaking of animation, there isn't that much going on outside of duels, a few other moments here and there, but nothing that flashy. Personally, I wasn't a fan of the character sprites. They all felt too generic and their similarities made it difficult in remembering who was who. I do enjoy the demon designs though, but that seems like a given for Megami Tensei. But why is Pyro Jack giving me the finger? I know I'm ripping on this game a lot, but I think him and Jack Frost might be the best part. But in all seriousness, the other highlight of this game for me is the music, especially during the later stages. It's nowhere near the best Megaten music, but just like card games, it takes me back to a much simpler time. Okay, maybe I lied when I said this game couldn't capture the same charm as Pokemon, because this music does feel like it at times. But really, outside of that, there isn't that much else to talk about Card Summoners. It's just a standard title filler that failed to simulate the same excitement as popular trends at the time. I can't imagine it did that much for its own card game as well, as that didn't seem to last that much longer either. And as for someone who actually lives in Japan and plays card games with their coworkers, I've never seen it, nor has anyone ever brought it up in discussion. And because of that, I can't say I'm shocked this game turned out the way it did, quickly fading into obscurity and seeing the little success it did. Its early stages are bad, criminally bad. However, things do improve gradually. Not by much, but just enough to keep you going. While I think that the card game and duel system needed more time to cook in the oven, they're fine in their own right and I had fun with them. Considering that this isn't a mainline game and can be casually played in short spurts, expectations really shouldn't be that high. But if I'm speaking honestly, there's no reason why someone should play this game other than if they're truly experts at making bad decisions, like me, or if they're practicing Japanese. Again, there are much better games if that's what you're trying to do. For that reason, I can't recommend this game and it gets a hard pass from me. That said, would I be interested in a faithful Megami Tensei game that brings a fun atmosphere, strong mechanics, and is well thought out in the story and character departments? You bet I would. But I doubt that will ever see the light of day, especially as a home console release. As for Card Summoner's ranking, it's a strong D. Yes, a big, strong D. I think its only saving grace may be from how much I surprisingly enjoyed the card game. It clearly doesn't compare to any of the other titles we've checked out so far, but I don't think it will be the worst Megami Tensei game we'll review in this video series. Actually, I know this isn't the worst, so wish me luck. With that said, leave a comment that you made it to the end of this video and I'll forever be at your service.